cortisol. And we have these things that we need for assurance that things are going to be okay. Because the one commonality between this man wanting to have his inheritance now and us is that this movement towards acquisition of stuff. That if I just have it, I'll be okay. If I can just hang on to things that are mine, I'm okay. I'm rich in the kingdom. And Jesus is prying our hands loose from these things and saying, you can't hang on to these things if you want to be a follower of me. And I love what he says here in verse 21 of chapter 12. He says, so is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. And he says, but God said, the fool is not as required of you, and these things you have prepared, whose will they be? And so is the one who lays up his treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Actually, the phrase is just really simple. Who's not into God. It's not rich, it's just into God. And Jesus says, if you're my child, you have to be into God. Instead of hanging on to things, aspirations, desires, well-intentioned hopes, ministries, phrases, theological phrases, you need to hang on to me. Because avarice is so alluring. And you're not hanging on to me. You need to be into me. You just need to hang on to me. And he's prying our hands loose. So I think what Jesus is doing is that he's helping us get into a contemplative state of what it means to be his follower. And I want to give you all a picture of that. That helps me think of that. My oldest son is about to have a baby, and we have 5 children. I came from a large family. There were 5 kids in my family. On my parents' side alone, when all the cousins get together and their kids, there's over 100 of us. We're like a small cult. Okay? Just on my mom's side. So we're used to a lot of kids around. And I love holding babies. I particularly love holding babies that I call schloopy babies and chunky babies. Schloopy babies are the babies that don't help whatsoever. You know, that are and if their hands are like this, they're actually dimpled inside, their knuckles dimple in. And they're the babies, some of the babies have real strong backs, and they hang on to you. And you could almost let go of them and they hang on. Schloopy babies are the ones that have absolute trust in you, and if you didn't hold them in 3 or 4 locations, they would fall out of you. Does that make sense? They put their hand in your face, they put their finger, and I think what Jesus is saying is that, do you really trust me? Or are you clutching onto something? Is there some avarice in your hand, either money, stuff, aspiration? Back straight up, hanging on? You got this? Or are you really resting in me? And I think what Jesus is doing throughout this parable and throughout this discourse is he's saying, you're not my kid till you're a schloopy baby. And I'm going to pry every little finger off until you relax and start putting your hand in my mouth. You're slooping back because I've got it. Does that make sense? He wants us to absolutely trust him. And trusting means not hanging on to anything. Because the abundance of your life, your suke, is not determined by the things that you possess. It's paradoxically it's things that you give away. And I love what he says here at the end, because I think that had we been there, and even as we read this now, there's a sense of conviction, like, Lord, I'm really no different than that. I can't put my finger at that guy wanting the inheritance. I can't say, well, at least in theology, I'm not in for the money. That's not me. We're all guilty of this very same thing. And I think Jesus is saying, I don't want you to feel that. I want you to know that I love you. And I know you. And I know that you're not a sleepy baby. I know that you're a clinger. But as I pry your fingers off, I want you to know I'm not ashamed of you. And I almost hear this as a whisper, and you can feel the anxiety beginning to be removed from the apostles and disciples as they hear these gracious words of Christ. But what might take the place of the anxiety is a sense of shame. And so I love what Jesus says here in verse 32. He says, fear not, little flock. It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. I love you guys. I know you. You're not sleepy. You cling to stuff. And don't be afraid. I'm not ashamed of you. You don't have to clutch so hard at everything, your aspiration, your dream. I'm giving you everything I've got. And I'm not holding back. It is my Father's pleasure to give you the kingdom. And then he basically says, so go out there and spend. Don't hang on to stuff. Spend. Open hands. Open hands. Walk with your toes out, dear. Go. None of this. This is what he's saying. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. He's changing our posture. So in one sense, he wants us to be contemplative, shluki babies when we're thinking about the kingdom of God, and he wants us to be like Charlie Chaplin when we're activated in the kingdom. He wants us to be open-handed with others. So what does this have to do with W.H. Auden and with Ron Brett? Let me read this epistle to a Godson just briefly. It's one of my favorite guys, and this is not the whole this is not the whole poem. This is a part of the poem. This is actually a poem that he wrote to his real godson. His godson, his name is Philip Spender. But there is some words here I think I need to explain in case you may know them. I didn't know them before I read, Auden. So the word oplocratic is used here. Oplocratic means mob rule. Okay, that's what the word oplocratic means. On the back, consinity, in the back, consinity, it refers to the harmonious sum of things arranged beautifully in parts. Okay, that's consinity. And then he talks about Cantor's logical paradise. That's from George Cantor, the mathematician, and his theory of infinite sets. It's a logical thing that math nerds really like talking about. That they extrapolate from that theories of the universe and everything. So those are what those phrases mean. But this is a part of his epistle to a godson. Let me read it to you, because I find this really hopeful. And I find his closing benediction is so similar to what Jesus says here in Luke 12. I find such resonance between the two of them. Dear Philip, thank God for boozy godfathers you wrote in our guest book, which was flattering, though I've reached the years when discretion calls for a yearly medical checkup. Who am I to avouch for a Christian baby, far less offer ghostly platitudes to a young man? And yestertimes it was different. The old could be helpful when they could nicely envisage the future as nameable, settled landscape their children would make the same sense of as they did, laughing and weeping at the same stories. Then sheep and goats were easy to recognize, local fauna. Good meant Giles the shoemaker taking care of the village ninny. Evil count folks who in his tall dungeon indulged in sinister eccentricities. But I speak from experience. How could I say that to you who can't remember when everyone traveled by railway? And the poor were what they were used to being, the creators of wealth, not as now they are, an expensive nuisance. Nobody has dared suggest gassing them, but someone surely will. You don't need me to tell you what's going on, the oplocratic media, joint with the under-the-dryer gossip, process and vent without intermission. Now listen to what he says about the church here. The unscarred, overfed enjoy Calvary as a verbal event, not satiric. No scorn will ashame the adversary, nor shoddily made to give a stunning display of consinity and elegance is the least we can do, and its dominant mood should be that of a carnival. Let us hymn to small the journal wonders of nature and families, and then finish on a serio-comic note with legends of ultimate eucatastrophe, regeneration beyond the waters. That's the sweet mind thought. But perhaps you think poems are as foolish as most poets, and would rather spend your spare moments romping around in Cantor's logical paradise or beseeching such naughty points as, can we hang a robber who is not there?